And I'm Keon.
And this is Inevitable, that podcast where we look at the Queen's Pawn 6 check. Because this week we watched Checkmate.
Written by Gerald Kelsey.
Directed by Don Chaffee.
And aired on November 24th, 1967.
Yeah, here we are. Checkmate.
At the bottom of the cliff that we dropped off of after Dance of the Dead.
I actually placed this higher than Dance of the Dead. I'm going to just start right off with the controversial statement. I'm going to say it right off the bat. I really enjoyed this episode right up until the final 2 minutes, which I'm just going to pretend don't exist.
Well, according to Midnight Only, this is actually one of the most beloved episodes of The Prisoner, which I find odd because this has always been one of my least favorites.
I think, and this is my interpretation from things like the Anorak Zone and Pop Apostle, that this episode is if most people only watch The Prisoner once, this is like one of their favorite episodes, but it apparently falls apart pretty rapidly on repeat viewings for a lot of people, not for everyone, but for a lot of people. So I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Maybe. I've always just found it boring and meandering.
I thought it was very interesting. The chess iconography, I guess, is part of the reason why I enjoyed it, because I've always kind of enjoyed chess and literally coded a computer to play chess, so I mean...
Yeah, impressive. Yeah, I've always not enjoyed chess at all, so maybe that has something to do with it. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe your enjoyment of this episode is entirely based on whether you like chess or not.
Interesting theory that we have no way of knowing is true or not.
It's true. I mean, we could interview Prisoner fans.
Worldwide, every single one, every person, track them down. If you've watched this episode, we will find you.
I don't like the implications.
Or we could just ask anyone listening to this to send us an email or contact us on social media and tell us whether they like chess and whether they enjoyed this episode of The Prisoner.
Yeah, we're going to crack this conspiracy wide the heck open.
Wide heckin' open?
Yeah. Nothing is safe from our gaze.
Well, this episode actually had some interesting making of stuff.
Yeah.
Because apparently it was running a little bit under time. So, McGowan, the hero that we need, the hero that we deserve, stepped in and wrote and directed his own scene.
And which scene was that? I bet it's the fight scene at the end.
No, it was perhaps unsurprisingly the scene where number 8 is in his house and he yells at her.
Ah, yes, the scene where he's a misogynistic ass.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks, Gwyn. That is actually, you are correct, unsurprising.
Apparently also, and I didn't realize this until it was pointed out, but number 8 has barely any relevance in the final dilemma, the final twist. I was like, wow, that's true. All this setup was for something that wasn't in the climax. It was for something outside of the climax. And apparently in earlier drafts, number 8 had a far larger role in the episode. Or in the climax, at least.
Yeah, but I bet Patrick stepped in and was like, we can't have no woman having lead roles unless they're number 2.
Which is why they gave number 8 the role of number 2, redacting Peter Wingard, or whatever his name was, taking his role, which he had already recorded for and auditioned for and gotten, away from him. No, that didn't happen.
Peter Wingard apparently asserted, according to one of the blogs I looked up, that Patrick McGowan liked his performance so much he wanted to keep him as a permanent number 2, but there's apparently absolutely no proof of this except for Peter Wingard's words, so...
Well, they're actually... So in the original planning documents for this, apparently there is text that says the only recurring characters are number 6 and the butler, and everyone else is not recurring. except a couple of the number 2s. Because, and Midnight Only, I think, or maybe it was Anorak Zone, it was one of the two, had something that they claimed was from the original like character briefing documents or whatever that talked about this, and that also in the same blurb indicated that the butler may or may not be number 1. So that's from the documents. I'm not going to comment on that. I just pointed out because I didn't even know that was a thing that they had planned, or something that they put in the character. I don't know what you'd call them, like blurbs, briefings, or whatever. Yeah.
I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, Peter Wingard apparently became like pretty well known in Britain after this for a couple of his roles. Apparently he became so well known like globally that one of the blogs I looked at asserted that there is a character in the Dark Phoenix saga, the comic book, called Jason Wingard, whose appearance is based on Peter Wingard.
Huh. That's how you know you've really made it, is when your appearance is getting plagiarized.
Yeah. But yeah, that's production information I have for this week.
Yeah, I didn't have anything else. Other
Prod
than that,
info.
It was smooth sailing out on the open seas on a little tiny raft that looks like it could sink at any moment.
And does. Well, Six wakes up, he goes outside, and they're like, hey, you should be the queen's pawn. And I was like, that a lot of people make a case for putting this off to free-for-all, or putting this really early because Six is trying to figure out who's the captain and who's the prisoner. And I'm going to make a couple of wild assertions at the end of this episode in regards to that. But I find it interesting placing this after Dance of the Dead, specifically for this line, because be the queen's pawn has such a deeper meaning after last week, where, what was her name? The actress who played number 2 last week?
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
I remember.
When she just totally owns number 6, uses his body to like convince the world that he's dead, and then like after that this week they're like, okay, now you have to be the queen's pawn, which he became in the resolution to Dance of the Dead. Like already I was like, oh hell yeah, symbolism, meaning, it's awesome, it's great.
I think this one in production order, I'll put it in the show notes if this is wrong, but I think production order wise this also comes right after Dance of the Dead. Like they made this one right after Dance of the Dead.
I think so. I don't remember for sure, but I think so.
Also, we skipped the epic intro where Rover's down the street. And everyone freezes.
Epic.
Everyone freezes except the chess master guy, who Rover totally ignores. You think Rover's going to kill him based on what happened in Arrival, but he survives.
Yeah, this episode's really interesting with respect to Rover because, we've only had one episode, and allegedly only one episode, where he's called Rover, and in this episode they refer to Rover, and I guess the other Rovers, as the Guardians. So that's interesting how Rover is the name that's stuck and not like the Guardian.
Yeah, who knows why that's the case.
Because Rover's catchier. Roger, Rover.
So right, number 6 joins this human-sized chess match, this Harry Potter knockoff. No, I'm kidding.
I was going to make the same reference, but you beat me to it.
And they start playing the game.
At first, I thought the queen on the white side, which is the side that Six is on, I thought her number badge said 6 because it was kind of out of focus, and I was like, that's kind of weird. Did they just think we wouldn't notice because it was like blurry and bad television, or like what's going on here? But then later on it becomes obvious that it's an 8. But like in this shot where it's in the background and it's blurry, it really looks like she's number 6 for a second, man.
Yeah, well, when you put it that way, like this episode more so than most others, I think shows other prisoners. Because sometimes I get the feeling, at least when watching other episodes, that like everyone's in on this except number six. Whereas this episode shows a sort of different interpretation of the village almost, or one that other episodes don't show as clearly, where there are other prisoners, probably, unless they're all secretly in on it. Like, do you kind of get that feeling too, or did you kind of get that feeling too from previous episodes of like, it's like number six is kind of alone in being a prisoner, and everyone else is in on it or has given in?
Yeah, I did get that sense, but I don't think this episode contradicts that because I actually think at the end of this episode, I came out thinking that the point was that it doesn't matter if you're a prisoner or a guardian because you're both, that everybody is actually both.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm going to talk about that at the end. I will say something really interesting is that a lot of this episode deals with things like chess moves, like rook to queen's pawn 6 and pawn to queen's pawn 2 or whatever, right? What's interesting about all of that is that we've talked a lot about how there's a lot of science fiction in this. This actually dates the episode because this is a method of writing chess moves called descriptive notation, which was popular and basically the only way to write and record chess moves until about 1981, when algebraic notation, which is what we use today, came into the forefront. And so much of this episode is based around allegory around these chess moves. But if you watch this today and you didn't know about descriptive notation, you would be so confused because you wouldn't recognize that they're chess moves, and a lot of that allegory would be lost. And I find that in many ways fascinating. And that's really all I have to say about it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea.
So, like, in descriptive notation, at the end when they're saying rook to queen's pawn 6, that's, like, such a clever line when descriptive notation is a thing because it's the character who played the rook. He is going to queen's pawn, who was number 6. But they're going to queen's pawn 6 because he's number 6, but that could also mean, like, square 6, and they're meeting up, and it's check because it's the start of their escape plan, so it's the first time they're really threatening the village. But, like, you wouldn't get any of that if you didn't understand that that's, like, back in that day, that was how you would actually record a chess move. Well, that was an actual, like, legal move that you could make on a board. I think
it's pretty obvious that, like, even if you don't know the method or whatever, which I don't, it's pretty obvious that they're, like, reading out, the turns of the game.
Yeah, they do provide at the beginning of the episode, when they have the game and you see the people moving, that like keys you into like how the moves are said and worded. But it's just so weird to me that that's completely out of date now, and that like even though a lot of this episode is forward thinking, there's no way they could have known that this style of notation would go out of date, and it did, and actually like makes this episode like kind of stuck in time almost.
Well, pretty much all of them are, for one reason or another. I don't think that's like a bad thing.
No, I don't think it's a bad thing either. I just find it really interesting.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyway, the people calling out the moves for each side, the white side is wearing a white badge and the black side's wearing a black badge. So that, wow.
And the guy who's playing number 6, number 6 starts talking to the queen, who's number 8, and she starts telling about how this guy was apparently a count whose ancestors used to play human chess and would behead people who like got captured on the board or whatever.
Yikes. Would suck to be a pawn then, since your whole purpose is basically to sacrifice yourself.
Number 6, out of the blue, asks her who number 1 is.
Yeah, has he done this before?
Only in the intro.
Huh. Interesting. So his first time is just like completely out of nowhere, and there's nothing like prompting it. He's just on a chessboard and just goes, "Hey, who's number 1?"
Yeah.
Wow.
She doesn't.
Honestly, not what I expected, but
she doesn't know. But what she does know is that number 6 has a plan to escape, or wants to escape at least, but he doesn't trust her.
I mean, I feel like everybody knows number 6 wants to escape. It's not like A, he's kept it a big secret, or B, he doesn't just go around trying to escape every week
that's
anyway.
What she literally says when she confronts him about it after the game. She's like, I know you're trying to escape. And he's like, how do you know that? And she's like, everyone is trying to escape who hasn't like been totally broken yet.
Imagine if he just said, well, it's because you're number 6 and your job is to escape. So, the rook, one of the rooks, starts rebelling because he doesn't want to make the moves. 6 is also kind of rebelling, but he makes the move eventually. But then the rook doesn't want to do it, and he just makes his own random move, and they just immediately, like, the security guards run in, pick him up, and run off with him.
Yeah.
Number 2, this is the most, like, I guess, suave number 2, because he is like completely unconcerned with the events of this entire episode. And even at the end, when like number 6 is tying him up, he just seems like so bored with what number 6 is doing. Like, he can't even, like, number 6 can't even get a rise out of him when he's capturing and tying him up.
Yeah, like number 6 and everyone else are like literally escaping, and he's like doing karate in his room.
Yeah. He's so comfortable and confident in his own abilities that he's not even paying attention. And amazingly, he has the success to back it up.
Yeah, he is one of the most aloof number 2s. And, you know, yeah, actually, that's it. He's just one of the most aloof number 2s.
So, we meet number 23, who is a nurse / psychiatrist / a little bit ill-defined exactly, but she's some sort of medical field practitioner.
A lot of this episode has to do with like psychology and psychiatry or whatever, I guess. So yeah. That number 2 especially seems particularly interested in stuff like that. So she probably,
I believe she's credited as psychiatrist.
Yeah.
So. And this is when I realized, like, if there was ever evidence for there being a time loop that resets every week, I was like, hang on, how many of these plots have involved doctors or medical people doing some sort of grand, like, medical scheme on villagers and number 6, but then have it be implied that it's been going on for, like, weeks or months? And I'm like, do they just employ, like, hundreds of whack job doctors who, like, all have their own weird schemes that they're, like, employing on the villagers? Like, to me, it seems more likely that it's just a new scheme every week when it resets. But anyway, imagining, like, a cure for wellness situation where all the doctors are in on weird schemes everyone's doing.
Well, they mostly are.
I just find it weird how there's, like, every doctor in the village has their own whack scheme to break number 6. And, like, number 2, when they get elected, I guess, just picks their favorite doctor and is like, I like your scheme the best.
Or chosen. I get the feeling that number 2 is not elected. We see that election, but somehow
one of the number 2s
one
was
of the
elected.
number 2s was elected.
Put it that way.
Like, somehow I get the feeling that outside of Free for All, like, there's no, like, election for number 2.
I would find that odd because so much of this show asserts that the village is democratic, and, like, part of the theming is that the democracy or democratic process doesn't mean anything because no matter who they elect, number 2 is always trying to break number 6. So, like, in the context of I guess a Watsonian perspective, I'd find it weird that they would not, at least, even if the number 2 was picked, that they wouldn't hold some sort of sham election every time number 2 is replaced, you know?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we don't see that if it's the case, but yeah, I don't know.
I mean, even the election we saw in Free For All was a sham, so...
I just always thought that, like, that was the only one.
Well, I mean, that's the great thing, is you can think whatever you want.
Man, what happened? I'm trying to go through my notes and figure out what happened, and that's the thing with this episode, is, like, it just feels so all over the place, whereas most of the episodes of this show don't feel that way at all. Most of them feel pretty streamlined.
See, I don't think that's true at all. I actually think there is a coherent like idea behind this whole thing, but I have to explain the whole plot for me to kind of explain what I'm thinking about. But what happens now is that after meeting 23, they bring in number 8. Well, first, actually, before they bring in number 8, they show number 6 the Rook because he is skeptical that they've kept the Rook alive. But number 2 is like, look, he's totally fine. And he tries to go for... There are multiple colored water coolers in the room, and he tries to go for the yellow one, I think, and nothing comes out. And then he gets an order from number 2 to go for the blue one.
He gets shocked when he tries to get water from one of the containers without being prompted to do so. And then number 2 tells him to go and use the blue one.
So he does, and it works out fine for him, so that's cool. And he's like, look, see, the Rook is now... see, look, number 6, the Rook is completely, like, subservient to us now. And then we
as soon as he gets out, he's like, hey, want to escape?
Yeah, pretty much. But, like, in the process, he leaves, and we see 23 brings in number 8, the Queen, and basically does this hypnosis on her to convince her that she loves number 6, and then they give her a necklace that can record her emotions and like tracks her.
Yeah, like it'll give off a response if she has like heightened emotions or whatever. Reminded me of that. Reminded me of Animals on Blake 7. Check out Zenith, the Blake 7 podcast, where Servalan like brainwashed Dana into thinking that she was in love with what's his name, the guy who was breeding the animals.
Yeah.
Oh, Justin. I can't believe I remembered his name. It was Justin.
Wow. I am amazed you remembered it because I didn't.
Yeah, I remember more about Animals than I would like to remember. Like that one scene where Avon just breaks into the room and kicks down a chair.
You mean the best scene in all of Blake 7?
That one scene also at the end where they have a battle and Og dies. He gets caught in the crossfire and dies.
Was Justin the one who was like awkwardly really, really older than Dana?
Yep.
And it was like... Yeah, okay, yeah. I remember. The whole story is coming back to me now, and I can remember the Avon scene in even more detail now. God, I really hope that you put that Avon scene in the show notes, if you can find it.
Well, now that Blake 7 has been taken off of YouTube, I can't. So...
Honestly, I want to live my life like Avon, walking into rooms and kicking down chairs. You know what? Actually, the next time I'm allowed to leave my house and quarantine is lifted and I can go to a conference and I give a talk, I'm going to start my talk by by flinging the doors open, running on stage, and just kicking a chair over.
All right.
People will be like, what the hell? Who is this man? Why did we let him in? But it'll be worth it.
Yeah, then you won't have to deal with the rest of the conference because you'll be kicked out.
Heck yeah. And then I can just like roam the city wherever the conference is. Free vacation. And all I have to do is kick a chair over.
So number 6 meets up with the Rook. And he's like, hey, I'm one of the prisoners just like you. The Rook doesn't believe it at first, but eventually he's convinced, and he and number 6 go on a little tour around the village. Number 6 has a plan devised from the information that he got from the chess master, which is that the chess pieces aren't marked by color. And number 6 is like, how do you keep track of the game? And he's like, you just got to know, man. You just got to get into the psychology of the pieces on the board and see how they move, see how they react.
Yeah, basically, and this is elaborated on a little more with the scene between 23 and between the psychiatrist and 2 that happens when they're kind of discussing like 6's psychiatric profile, and they talk about how all the prisoners are made subservient because they basically remove a lot of their aggressive or angry tendencies, but they don't want to do that with number 6 because they've got other plans for him. And number 6 kind of figures this out independently, that the people who are prisoners are basically subservient and have, will do whatever they're told and basically have no drive to, antagonize.
Yeah, so he goes around showing the Rook a couple examples. I think one of them is like they tell this guy who's doing some landscaping, some gardening. They tell him to like they need a word with him, and he's just like, "Well, screw you, no." And then they go and like tell some guy who's painting something like that he's doing like I forget what they say, but they tell him he's doing a bad job, and he's like, "Well, I can do it again if you want." And they're like, "No, it's fine." And they just like, "Yes, start over. We want that thing green, not beige." Totally mess with like the village color scheme. That could be number 6's.
Just repaint Port Marion.
Yeah, that could be number 6's like real win here. Is if he like went behind number 2's back, went under everyone's noses, and repainted the entire village. He's thinking.
I did read that they recreate this chess match at the annual prisoner convention in Port Marion.
Yeah. Nerds.
Nerds, says the guy who's a co-host on a prisoner podcast.
Look, this is not a prisoner podcast. It's a classic sci-fi podcast that just happens to be dedicating at least 18 weeks to the prisoner.
All right. I did find a prisoner podcast this week. It's called Tally Ho, the prisoner podcast.
Well, maybe I'll have to listen in.
Tune in.
Oh, I wonder if that's the one that's done by Steven Shapansky and Erica Ensign from Radio Free Skaro and Verity, respectively.
I want to say no. I think theirs is a different name. Anyway.
Throughout all of this, the Rook thinks that number 6 is actually trying to break him and that he's actually... in the show they call them warders, but I've only heard the term warden. Not warder.
Yeah, but we only find this out like at the end of the episode.
No, he says it. So well, there's like a little indication. Number 6 is like I'm one. He says one of us, and the guy's like, wait, one of us, and he's like, I'm a prisoner too.
Yeah, but if you don't know, that line like means nothing. Like that line meant nothing to me. Like as I was watching, it wasn't until on retrospect that I recognized. So.
So they reveal, or the Rook reveals for some reason that I think number 6 like probes into why he's in the village, and he tells him that he built some sort of electronic defense system. He doesn't really elaborate on what this defense system was, but apparently it got stolen. A politician allowed it to get leaked, and he was punished for it.
It was whoever's leaking information about Torchwood.
Same person still at it 50 years later.
God damn it.
No one's been able to catch this like government informant in the UK government.
The whole village is just trying to get number 6 to reveal why he resigned so that they can then grill him on who this informant is.
Yeah, that's their real plan. Number 6 is like totally not an important person whatsoever. They're just using him to get to the higher ups. Eventually, at some point in the episode, I think it's right now, which is why I'm saying it right now, they start probing number 6's mind using like those old association tests where you say a word, someone says a word, and you're supposed to say the first thing that comes to mind, and eventually it's supposed to tease out your inner demons if you do it long enough. But
yeah, and I guess number 6's inner demons are democracy and drinking at the pub.
One of the more interesting ones from this association thing is when the doctor says free and he says for all.
Yeah. Really? I was more interested when she says hope and he says anchor, and they're like, what? And he's like, oh, it was a pub I used to drink at. They're like, Hope and Anchor or whatever, which is apparently a real pub in London. So fun facts.
Yeah. Also love game.
Yeah, really, really reveals a lot about number 6, actually, that one. The fact that he just, like, I guess played like Nadia in Chimes of Big Ben. Who, weirdly enough, was also number 8.
Who, weirdly enough, also played him. just like he was played in this episode by
Patrick McGowan.
Patrick McGowan and the Rook, in a way.
What if the Prisoner is just like it's not an allegory for democracy or like anything real life. It's just the inner workings of Patrick McGowan's mind, and number 6 is like his subconscious, and just everything else is like societal pressure pressing down on him.
I don't know. That doesn't seem too far off from like what this show is kind of about.
Great. Said that as a joke, and now it's a potentially legitimate theory. Great.
I mean, I don't think like with the exactitude that you're saying, but like there's something of that in this show.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I could see that. Anyway, number 8 walks up to number 6 and is like, "Hey, I'm in love with you." And he's like, "You barely know me." And she's like, "Yeah, so what?"
Doesn't mean anything. I think she appears in his house first. He like wakes up and she's just there, making hot chocolate and humming "Pop Goes the Weasel."
He yells at her to get out, but she comes back later.
Yeah, she starts crying and like really guilt trips number 6, and he's like, "What are you doing? Stop that. Stop crying."
Yeah, except he says it in somehow the most like
like offensive
badass way possible. So he says, "I'm waterproof. A small drizzle won't wash away my doubt."
"I'm waterproof. I wade into the water waist deep all the time. Can't touch me."
Yeah, in like slacks. Yeah. The absolute mad. Honestly, that's the most offensive thing about this show is that he just wades into water, just in clothes, like every week.
Ran into the water. I don't know if you like noticed that scene, but he like ran top speed into the water this week.
I did. My note is God just running through the water in clothes. My God, man.
Maybe that's why Patrick McGowan felt like such a prisoner, He was constrained by a society that doesn't accept wading into the water in clothes.
I really thought you would have said maybe that's why he feels like a prisoner, because his clothes are always drenched wet and he can't get them off because they're stuck to him.
God. For some reason...
And he does it in shoes, too. I don't know if you've ever, like, wet your shoes or walked through a puddle so that your shoes are drenched, but I did it in middle school. It was the worst experience of my life because not only were my shoes soaked, my socks were soaked, too.
Yeah. For some reason, that's always been one of the things that I remember most from this show. Like... I like this is an episode that I kind of remember. Starting next week, I have literally no memory of like the next 3 or 4 episodes. But what
you don't remember the memorable episode Hammer into
No,
Anvil.
I literally have no idea what that episode is about. But like one of the things that has always remained with me about this show is Patrick McGowan going into the water with clothes on.
Well, everybody takes something different from the show.
Yeah, some people engage with the themes, some people fall in love with the beautiful cinematography, and some people just focus on like going into water with your clothes on.
Jeez.
So number 6 and the Rook start stealing a bunch of stuff. They're walking around the village to the tune of the Pink Panther-esque theme, and just stealing some of the wireless phones that are around.
And also the video cameras that for some reason I thought were like more well hidden than just being a literal camera on a rotating podium. For some reason I always thought they were like hidden inside statues or something, but apparently they're just out and about, just like for everyone to see.
They're in the statues too, but yeah, there's some ones that are not, I guess.
Weird. Yeah, they disassemble that bad boy.
Yeah, and they're doing all of this to create a radio in the little tent on the beach. The Rook is almost done, but he needs a few more parts. So number 6 goes out to get him, and who should he meet but number 8?
Yeah, well, she's following him because she loves him.
And she shows him the locket. He tells her they're sitting on some... First of all, they're sitting on some very comfortable-looking rocks. And Number six asks why she's following him. She says, well, it's because I love you and you love me. And he's like, what? No, I don't. And she's like, well, if that's the case, then why did you give me this locket with your picture in it? And that's how he sort of finagles his way into taking the locket away from her, because I think he knows. I think he like is clued into the fact that this is some sort of tracker.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't know at the time that it records emotions and is actually a much more complicated device than he had any hope of it being. But as soon as he hands it to the Rook, he's like, this is a way more complicated device than you probably realize, because it can like record emotions and track her. And he's like, well, does it have what you need? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, all right, that's all I care about.
Yeah, so they finish the radio. They enlist, they send coded messages throughout the village telling the other people who are in on this plan that they're going to be escaping soon. And one of the people who's in on the plan is the shopkeeper who we met in Arrival, who gave number 6 the map.
The absolute legend?
I would have guessed that he was one of the, if we're separating into prisoners and wardens, I would have guessed that he was like, one of the wardens. But I guess not.
Yeah, I would have made the same guess. He seemed like a warden in Arrival, but I guess not. I guess he's actually just a really good prisoner who likes to pretend he's...
Maybe that's part of it too, is like
not.
In Arrival, he seems like he's part of the village infrastructure. But then in this one, he possibly isn't, or maybe is, or, you're kind of just left with like, he's both at once, or he's neither, or like, what is this guy? You're kind of just left confused in a way.
Yeah, but again, I think it works fine with what I think the theme of this episode is, which is that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So
they enact the plan. The plan is to basically just send an SOS signal and pretend to be a plane that's crashing into the ocean. And it works. They immediately get a response, like right away.
Meanwhile, in the control room, like, the psychiatrist is panicking because the necklace went offline, and she's like, no, not possible. Oh god.
Yeah, they zoom in on number 8, and they're like, oh god, she's not wearing the necklace.
So so number 6 decides to go around town telling people the plan is on by telling them rook to queen's pawn 6 check. We should mention during the beginning chess game that the butler was replicating the chess match on like his own chessboard, which is, I guess, important at the end. But number 6, so this plan is basically to send the rook out on this janky as hell
raft. It's like a life raft.
Watercraft. Yeah. And he has to pretend to be the downed plane, and when the boat comes to rescue him, he directs them to number 6 and the rest of the gang.
Yeah, meanwhile, number 6 and the rest of the gang are in number 2's place, gloating about their victory.
I don't know why he did this. This is just hubris.
And it doesn't work at all. Number 2 is just like, yeah, whatever.
Number 2 had been doing karate, and they're like, hey, like, there's a problem, like, they're escaping. He's like, I said I wasn't to be disturbed, and they're like, well, they're escaping. He's like, fine, I'll come deal with it. And again, like, 6 is trying to get a rise out of him, like, don't you like being captured? And 2 is just like, literally does not matter. Like, literally could not care less.
They stop hearing the signal, and that apparently means that the boat's there. Number 6 thinks something's wrong, though, so he goes to investigate. And I'm kind of fuzzy as to what happens next. This is the part where he runs into the water, but I think he just sees the raft like without the rook. I don't know.
Yeah, the rook's not on the raft, and he sees a boat. So his instinct, I guess, is to run out to the boat, to get on the boat and escape, I guess.
His prisoner senses start tingling. Yeah, so he goes to the boat, and he looks how I've always read this scene is that he's like just totally prepared to abandon the rest of them. Like he's just like, hey, like I'm the only one left. Like let's get out of here.
Yep.
I don't think he says that explicitly, but I'm pretty sure that's what he's doing in this scene.
And he gets on the boat and he's all ready to go. And I think it looks like the same boat as Many Happy Returns,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, it does.
But then there's this great reveal that made the episode for me, where number 2 turns around in the number 2 chair in the office on a television screen and goes, "Yeah, you thought you could escape number 6? Guess what? You can't. Turns out in your hubris, you displayed so many characteristics of the Wardens that in fact you convinced the Rook here that you were one of us, trying to get him in a trap. Luckily for him, he recognized the folly and didn't go along with it in the end."
Right, so the Rook had been working against number 6 with the village the entire time because he thought number 6 was trying to get him in a corner there.
And I was like, wow, this is great. This is one of the greatest episodes of The Prisoner. And then they immediately throw it away by having number 6 go, no! And he just starts beating people up on the boat. And I'm like, why?
He flings a little glass ashtray at the TV, and then the most comical fight music you've ever heard starts playing, and he starts beating the hell out of the people on the boat.
And if you look at the scene really closely, you'll notice that there's no water around the boat, and that this is definitely just a set of the deck of the boat.
Directed by Patrick McGowan then, because he directed the studio scenes. So that's how you know that this is his direction.
He would want to direct his own fight scene.
Yeah, I don't think it ruined the episode. Again, like, it's not just The Prisoner, but I don't really like fight scenes in anything. I tend to zone out during them. So I won't be one to say, like, yes, this fight scene was amazing. It should have been, like, it's my favorite part of the episode. It wasn't, but, like, I don't know. I don't think it ruined it.
I don't know. I think it kind of undermined some of the themes of this episode by trying to make it like an action adventure when it wasn't. That this was like a very contemplative episode. But hey, you know, what can you do?
Yeah, well, it's both. This whole show is kind of both of those things at once.
Yeah, I guess.
What's weird here is that they send Rover after the boat, and I never realized this until now, but you see on the screen like a close-up of a lava lamp bubbling up, and then it switches over to Rover like being birthed or whatever. So I never realized that Rover is like actually supposed to be a lava lamp bubble.
Huh. Yeah, I had never noticed that. That's yeah, that's super cool.
Totally radical, yeah.
Totally radical, bro.
Yeah, and then and that's it. That's the episode. That's Checkmate.
Well, so okay, all right. The end kind of does bring it back a little bit because we see a pawn on number 2's control panel, and the butler picks it up and puts it back on a chessboard. And this just like, man, this whole chess metaphor, like when he did this, everything kind of clicked into place. In my mind, it kind of just plays into this whole, not necessarily like time loop thing, but the fact that it almost seems in a way that the village resets every week, kind of like a game of chess, right? You could play a whole game of chess, but then once you're done, everything just resets to the way it was at the start. Like it doesn't change anything, even if you win or you lose. At the end of the game, when you set it up for the next game, everything returns to how it started. So at the end of the day, it was like number 6 didn't learn anything. You know, he thought he had a way of figuring out who the prisoners and wardens were, but at the end of the day, one, he didn't really, because he himself convinced people he was a warden, even though he was a prisoner and he knew he was a prisoner. So people may not even know what they are, and maybe lying to him and what they say they are and everything. But not only that, he just completely and utterly failed in everything.
Yeah, if we're gonna do if we're gonna insert our little win or lose section here, this is a definite loss for number 6.
And I don't know, I really like the way that this metaphor is set up with the butler putting the pawn back on the board, because it's basically saying, you know, Number 6 was off the board because he thought he was escaping, but now he's back in play. And at the end of the day, it was all just part of the game, and the game resets now. And once again, he's just a pawn for the higher ups of the village to use in their plan or whatever.
Yeah,
that may
and
be.
just like a chess match, it's hard to tell who's who, right? Like the pieces are different colors, but they're the same shapes. And you could be playing white one game and just as easily be playing black the next type thing.
Exactly, and also there's eight pawns on either side, and they're all identical, so you have no idea. Like, there's no identifying mark for any of the pawns.
Yeah, you even see that in the actual chess game with the people that they're playing earlier, where the little staffs that they're holding to indicate which piece they are like both black and white, which is why number 6 is like, how can you tell like who's who?
Yep. And also, if you want to take this even further, you can identify, you have 8 pawns, but you can identify the pawns from each other by what square they start on. But the deeper into the game you go, the less you're able to discern, which pawn is which. So when 6 came into the village, you could easily say, well, he's definitely a prisoner. But the longer he's been here, the longer he's played into the system by trying to escape, by not telling them what they want to know, the longer he's been privy to this whole thing, it becomes less and less clear if he's actually still a prisoner or if he's also part of, the wardens. Pawns and chess pieces can both attack and defend at the same time. So, the longer the game goes on, the less you know about who they are as a person, kind of thing.
Yeah, number 6. That's interesting you bring that up because I never thought of this until now. But like number 6 is trying to defy the village's power and show them that they don't have power over him by escaping. Yet the more he does that and the more he fails, the more he just like plays into the fact that they're like this entity that does have power over him and like a lot of other people. Because even if they don't get what they want, which is why he resigned, he's still there. He still can't make it out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in a way, the more he fails, the more kind of invincible the village seems, right?
Yeah, and not only seems, but like kind of what we were talking about a few weeks ago, where like, maybe they just make maybe everything he destroys, like when he destroyed the general, maybe they just make a better general. We don't get that in the show, but like it's possible that they just create a better one. And with the symbolism with the telex machine still working after he rips out its innards.
Right. Yeah, I mean, all very interesting. Again, I think I like this because I really like the way that there'd always been a little bit of a chess metaphor with the prisoner because the black and the white badges, but this made it a lot more explicit and I think tied together a lot of really interesting things like the game resetting. Every week we don't quite start over because there's some continuity between some of the episodes, really. I mean, I know I advocate this whole time loop reset theory, but there is some continuity, but still it feels like every week, we open with the title sequence, we end with number 6's face behind the bars. So every week the game resets and we start again and we go through the motion. And the longer it goes on, the less we know about who's who and who's doing what and what's the plan. And then the one constant seems to be the number 6 fails to escape.
Yeah, that's interesting. In that, like, the longer you watch the show, the less you really know what's going on. And
yeah, I mean, it seems very obvious in Arrival what's going on is that they want to know why he resigned, but the longer it goes on, the less it seems like it's actually about that, and the more it seems like it's about something else that seems to be unclear.
Yeah, which is the opposite of most shows. Like, you watch, a TV season expecting, like, all right, I'm going to learn a little bit more each week and figure out the mystery if there is one, or learn more about the characters and their inner, the inner workings of their minds, or learn more about this world or whatever. But, like, it seems like the more you watch The Prisoner, the less is clear. Like, everything just, I don't know, kind of gets muddled.
Yeah.
Which is cool, I guess.
I enjoy it.
Yeah, I just wish this episode was a little more, I don't know, I just find it, like, slow and meandering. I don't know. I've just never thought that this was one of the best ones. It's one that I find myself checking the timestamp a lot.
That. I didn't really find myself checking the timestamp in this one at all. So.
Yeah. So who would you say is number 1 if there is a number 1 in this episode?
I think it was the psychiatrist
Huh.
lady. Even though number 2 definitely seems very calm, cool, collected, and, in control, the one really driving the plan this week is the psychiatrist. She's the one pushing to do X, Y, and Z to number 6, to insert number 8 into the situation. And so I just felt like she had more control than she was letting on.
Yeah, I can see that. I feel like the Rook is a better candidate for number 1. Perhaps this was all part of a larger game where even number 2 was deceived into thinking that the Rook was not a warden and was in fact a prisoner who thought number 6 was not a prisoner and was a warden, but really was actually number 1, controlling the situation and inserting himself into it the entire time.
Yeah, I could see that. But that's what's great, is that you never really know, I guess, until Fallout.
Well, I don't know. So, this episode had some actors in it.
Wow. I feel like you made that exact same segue in the Torchwood episode.
Yeah, I did. How do you like that? Now that we're on the same number episode for Torchwood and The Prisoner, check out Trust Your Doctor, a Doctor Who podcast where we're watching Torchwood. Now that we're on that same number, you got to go for the same things in every episode.
I don't think that's true.
Well, thoughts can be deceiving.
I guess. So can thoughts. THOTS. They can be deceiving too. I think. Don't actually know.
Well,
anyway.
Yeah.
I guess I'll go first this time then. I've got Ronald Rod as the Rook. Wow, that alliteration.
Was it Rod or Rad?
Considering I misspelled Law and Order UK as Lawn and Order, it might be Rad.
I'm looking it up right now. Yeah, it's Rad.
Alright, Ronald Rad. Still alliteration. Sort of. He was in the Saint Zedkar's Crown Court. Oh, God. Oh, no.
What?
Oh, no. He was in a King Lear TV show, but I misspelled it as Kink Lear.
Oh, no.
Oh, God. What was I doing looking these actors up? Softly Task Force, Callan, The Avengers, Secret Agent / Danger Man. He was in a Sherlock Holmes adaptation. He was in a Tale of Two Cities adaptation, which I bring up because Peter Wingard was in that same adaptation.
Yeah, really getting in the classics there. Tale of Two Cities.
A lot of spy fiction.
Yeah, speaking of Peter Wingard, he was also in this episode. He played number 2. He'd been in Sherlock Holmes, this 1965 one, The Avengers. He was in The Saint, which the writer of this episode, what was his name again? Gerald Kelsey apparently also wrote for The Saint. He was also in Planet of Fire in Doctor Who. He played Timonov.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a bunch of other stuff that I didn't recognize.
Yeah, he played Sidney Carton in Tale of Two Cities. Peter Wingard, that is.
Huh.
I've got Patricia Jessel coming in with our actor / actress who died suspiciously close to the airing of the episode of the week. She died in 1968. She played the psychiatrist, and she wasn't actually in a lot of stuff that I recognize. ITV Play of the Week. She was in a Hamlet adaptation. She was also in a movie called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which I haven't seen, but I know about. And that's pretty much everything I wrote down for her.
Yeah, coming in at number 4 on this list of actors, we have Rosalie Crutchley, who played number 8. She'd been in some more historical stuff. She was in A Tale of Two Cities. I'm not sure if it was the same one as the other two. She was in the Count.
Kind of weird if it was.
Yeah, she was in some adaptation of The Count of Monte Cristo. She's in something called Jackanory or something like that, which seemed to be a big role for her. And she's in a bunch of other stuff, acting up until the late 90s.
I don't have anybody else, so...
Yeah, that's it for me, too. Oh, I did have a quote this week. It was a little exchange, which was when number 8 originally confronts number 6. She's like, "Tell me your plan and I'll help," and he goes, "Help who?" Which I thought was pretty clever.
I also had a quote when they're playing the chess match at the beginning, and I think number 6 asks if he can make any move he wants, or actually, he says something about moves, and they have a little exchange, and he says this line, "That's not allowed, the cult of the individual," which was interesting because you don't typically associate the word cult with like an individual, you know? I mean, okay, let me clarify. When you think of a cult, you think of like a charismatic leader, but the way 6 is talking about it is, but a cult in that sense requires a lot of people, and the way 6 is talking about it is like the cult of one person, it's just yourself.
Or he's saying like the cult of individualism or something like that.
Yeah, but still, that's like, a cult usually has, dozens, if not hundreds of people.
Yeah. There's, what was it? Part of that, what was I going to say? Damn, I completely blanked on it now. Yeah, whatever. I was going to say something else about that exchange, but yeah, forget about it. Oh, it was the chess master guy tells number 6 that he plays a good game, which was an odd line to me because, like, the people on the board they're not really playing the game, they're just taking the moves. They're just enacting the moves, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The hardest part of the game isn't even playing the game. It's caring enough to care about playing the game.
It's standing out in the sun all day until you're ordered to move.
Wow, weirdly enough, that song I just quoted has a line in its final verse that goes, "You'll never be a king if you're acting like a pawn." That's kind of weird. The song is Canter by Jerry Cinnamon. I'll link it in the show notes.
Huh.
Anyway, I guess on that note, all right, so we have an email from Sergeant Drano entitled "The Prisoner, Dance of the Dead." Hello again, fellow citizens. So, Dance of the Dead. This was the one episode of The Prisoner that I actively did not like the first time I watched it. Ooh. Keon's over there like, oh,
it hurts.
Since then, I have grown to like it a lot better. The reason for my initial dislike is because it felt to me like such a downer compared to other episodes of the series. Number 6 seems to be at a disadvantage to the entire episode, succeeds at basically nothing, and then the episode ends on this really strange cliffhanger about number 6 being, quote, dead, unquote. To me, this episode also has a more surreal quality compared to other episodes. Even beyond the usual mind-bending plots, this episode gives an unreal quality to the village itself. Number 6 seems very disoriented and out of his depth this episode, and there are several references to him being, quote, new here, unquote, and having only arrived, quote, quite recently, unquote. As such, I would order this as episode 2. The black cat is in this episode as well. It feels to me like this is number 6's first meeting with the cat, which number 2 ultimately says is her cat. Order-wise, it thus makes more sense to me that this would be the cat's first appearance, and the cat's appearance in Many Happy Returns is intended to be a callback to Dance of the Dead. In the opening scene, when the doctor's having Dutton call number 6 and get him to give information, it looks like there may be a doppelganger of the Doctor who is with number 6 on the monitor. Take a look again if you have the chance. I swear they look identical. Interesting character in Roland Walter Dutton, and when he calls number 6, he mentions that the, quote, committee, unquote, wants information from, quote, you, me, Arthur, the Colonel, everyone, unquote. It feels like a good fit that Arthur and the Colonel could be Arthur Fotheringay and Colonel J from the Chimes of Big Ben. This could be some nice foreshadowing for that episode. We could even theorize that upon his arrival in, quote, London, unquote, number 6 may have requested Fotheringay and Colonel J as intermediaries because the village previously interrogated him about them. This is kind of a weird episode because it feels a little bit all over the place. It doesn't feel like there's any particular plot this time around to break number 6. Feels more like general slice of life in the village. Cool that number 6 gets his suit back for the party in spite of having been previously told his clothes had been burnt on arrival. This episode clarifies that Control, the room with the seesaw, is inside the town hall somewhere. Interesting that number 6 tries to enter and is blocked, presumably by the same barrier seen in the general. The fact that another villager is surprised that number 6 even tried to enter means that this barrier is common knowledge, and number 6 is new to the point that he did not know about the barrier. The final scene of this episode is just really bizarre to me, and I find it hard to take literally. It doesn't seem like the village did any sort of purposeful engineering to get number 6 into this room with this magical teletype machine, and yet there he is with number 2 cackling away, and then the story ends. So what would happen next? Number 6 is supposedly dead, with the villagers actively hunting him down to kill him. Number 2 is cackling away at the teletype machine, so what next? After 15 minutes or so, number 2 just settles down and says, quote, "Ah, well, that was funny. Never mind about the whole death sentence thing. You can go back home now. Everyone will be back to normal in the morning," unquote. Ah, well, that's all for now. Ha 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 ha. Bracket, type, bracket, Sergeant Drano, Station 7, the door. Well, Drano, let me propose to you the time loop reset theory.
Oh my God.
And I'll just leave it at that. Just leave it at that.
Yeah, I think you've perfectly hit the nail on the head, Sergeant Drano. Everything you're mentioning is why I love Dance of the Dead and why it's my favorite episode of The Prisoner.
I guess we don't have much to say about this email. I feel like we answered a lot of these questions in the episode itself, so like what happens next and the story ends and the cacophony of ideas in the episode.
Yeah.
But the email is appreciated anyway.
Yeah.
And look forward to hearing your thoughts on episodes moving forward that Keon apparently has absolutely no memory of.
Yeah.
Hammer into Anvil, which is the best episode title I've ever heard, I guess. But thanks for reaching out, Sergeant Drano, as always. And, well, if there's anyone who would like to reach out to us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decorativevegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Checkmate, Keon. I don't know. You can find us on YouTube at Decorative Vegetable. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher, all at Inevitable, a classic sci-fi podcast. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook, Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast and follow us on Twitter. Next time we're going to be watching Hammer into Anvil. But until then, the end.